Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Carrie-Lynn Hotson about interview preparation and common errors people make. Carrie-Lynn Hotson, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Ontario. I am south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we are going to be talking about interview preparation and common errors that people make and how to avoid them. And I would love to look at this from both sides, really. From the HR perspective, I'm always thinking about interviewers and what they can say and can't say, what they can do and shouldn't do ever. And that's the types of mistakes that they make. So there's the mistakes and errors on the interviewer side. There's also the mistakes on the interviewee side. Really, we want to have both be as successful as possible so that we can find good matches, right? And that's the challenge that I think every organization faces. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. As we get started, I just wanted to share Carrie-Lynn's bio with everybody. Carrie-Lynn holds a Bachelor of Arts Honors from Carleton University in Criminology and has a postgraduate certificate in Human Resource Management. She has worked for 25 years as a coach, leader, facilitator, and HR senior manager. 6 years ago, she started a business entitled Job Interview Coach, based entirely on her desire to help people better understand the interview process and develop a confidence to rock their next interview. Carrie-Lynn is also an aspiring author. Her nonfiction business guide illustrates the importance of organizations to uncover the underlying needs, interests, and issues facing their employees. The book provides leaders with strategic tools, assessments, and practices they can utilize in knowing who you lead, and it will be available to readers this summer. Carrie-Lynn, a pleasure to have you. Anything else you would like to share with me and my listeners before we dive on into the conversation?
Huge shout out to all those HR staff listening in, because I come from HR. It is an incredibly tough position to be in. I know how hard you work. And yeah, I want to help you both hire the right people and also add some skills to your interviews themselves to make sure that you're getting the assets that you need.
Yeah, excellent. Well said. Well said. Okay, so as we get started, first I have to just say, this is just like a little previous life moment. But I note your degree in criminology. My PhD is in sociology. And for about 3 years while I was going through my PhD program, they assign you to teach different classes. And I taught criminology for 3 years in another life. This was years and years ago, but it was so much fun. I loved teaching that class, even though it has nothing to do with anything else I've ever done in my life. So we have that kind of random connecting point. And obviously you've gone a completely different path than your original criminology education, it seems. But there's great connection points and tie over, I think, to the HR space. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, actually, I had a kind of an interesting path. So my degree was in law and psychology, and then I specialized in criminology. And I actually went into policing for 17 years. So I supervised within policing and was a police officer. And then I learned a ton of skills there that I transferred over into HR, because it's always dealing with people. It's just different aspects.
Yep, absolutely. Wonderful. Okay, so let's talk then now about interview preparation and the common errors that people make. And let's start on the organizational side. the interviewer. What types of preparation should we be doing? And then we can talk about some of those errors that we need to be avoiding.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really important because we all know how much time we have to invest in trying to create that job post and then publicize it and get people to apply for it and then do the interviews. And it's exhausting. It's very expensive. And so we really want to make sure we're hiring the right people. And it starts right from the beginning. Make sure that your job posts speak truly to what you need in that job. Use words that people can understand and then apply into a question and into an answer so you can analyze your data, because that's really what you're doing. You need to think of yourself as a business, and this interview is a job business transaction. You are trying to hire the best investment. The other piece that I found in HR was we put a lot of work into creating the interview questions and creating the job post. But then we would get so frustrated because the people coming in the door didn't seem to know how to interview. They didn't understand how they needed to prepare. And I'm sure every listener out there knows exactly this feeling. You sit there as the panelist, you've scheduled off all your time, you had 20 different interviews, and at the end you're going, I don't know which one we should hire, because I feel like when we looked at the resumes and the applications, it didn't come across in the interviews. And now we don't want to take a gamble with our investment, but we're not sure. So one of the things that I'm teaching organizations is set your people up for success. One, it's going to make your job a lot easier. So give them material, give them things like some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, how to prepare for their interview, because you're doing yourself a huge favor. You're setting them up, you're giving them what they can expect. Don't hide things, help them. I'll tell you, it really will market your company as being very inclusive. People look at it very, very well. And in the end, your candidates will give you a better product. So you have data actually to analyze. So I think that would be my biggest tip to organizations right off the hop. Do a little bit of work, just put some resources on your website. And then you get to test them too. Do they actually read the website? Did they actually study anything? Because if they didn't, well, that tells you a little bit about their character too.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And there, to a point, you're trying to test them, right? As you just said. But if it's completely disconnected from anything they can possibly prepare for, then what are you actually testing? And what I see so often on the organization side with interviewing is this kind of casual approach to it. Like they want flexibility, and they recognize it's a subjective process. So they want flexibility. They don't want to be locked into anything. And so the interviewer or the committee of people interviewing, they just want to be able to go with the flow, ask whatever questions they want to ask. All of that is really a recipe for failure. It's a recipe for asking questions that are illegal, that are going to get you into trouble. But it's also just a recipe, to your point earlier, that do you really actually know what you're actually looking for, that you actually want and need? And are you asking questions that fit, that are going to give you the data that will help you understand how this applicant fits into those needs? And so often I have seen the exact, if you can convince people to have predetermined interview questions so they can stay consistent across applicants, I will review those questions, and I'll look at the job posting. I'm like, wait a minute, these don't even seem to connect. So what do you really want? Is the job posting off? Are the interviews off? Are both off? Like, what's actually going on here? Let's make sure we get our ducks in a row, actually know what we want. If there's a hiring committee, make sure everyone's on the same page, that everyone on the committee, even though they have different perspectives, they're still going to know what the goal is and what the needs are of the organization hiring for this position. Let's make sure we do that work up front. Not only will that help us as the on the employer side do a better job of screening, but like you said, we're setting people up for success. So instead of them trying to read our minds and figure out what is needed, they can put their best foot forward and demonstrate the skills, the competencies, the capabilities that are going to help them be successful in the job. That's what we want to know. And if we don't know those things, we're flying completely blind, and we might as well just be pulling a name out of a hat almost.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that's really important too, that for organizations, you really need to put some thought into who is it? What are the skills and the type of person that you're looking for this position? Because you might find that there's some very different answers. And I find sometimes that's why the questions, people go astray with the questions, because they're looking for particular skills that maybe match their skills or people that they want to lead. In my book called Knowing Who You Lead, I actually call it, do you want to hire a mini me?
Exactly. Yep.
And the dangers of that. And if we are really going to create unique, authentic, innovative organizations, we need to match the people to what we need, not as an organization, not what we need as a leader of who we want to lead. So I think there's a lot of value into matching the questions, like you said, to the job description, agreeing who it is, the type of person that we're trying to hire, and then moving from there. And sometimes that's work that needs to be done pre-interview, because then what happens is when you start marking it, people are looking for different things in the responses because of their own personal needs and biases potentially. And that can cause a lot of confusion on a panel. One person
it absolutely does.
Marks and the other person, marks them really low and you think, what? So the other piece is to have very coherent scales that you're going to use for those answers. What are you looking for?
Yep. All of that. So important. And again, if it's a committee of people going through the interviewing process, you're going to have people with different perspectives and backgrounds, and they're going to see things differently. And that's good, to have varying perspectives. But if people are completely off in terms of what they think the needs are of the position, then it's a recipe in just futility because you're not actually going to really, I don't know, you're not going to accomplish much of anything that's meaningful. So all of that super important on the organization side, on the front end, making sure you're doing all that in preparation before you ever get to the point of interviewing. There's a reason why interviewing, there's been lots of studies on the efficacy of interviewing in the employee selection process and how effective it is. And it's not good. I mean, for the most part, the studies show consistently it's one of the worst possible ways to choose somebody for a job. That's because most organizations and most hiring managers, most people doing the interviewing don't know what they're doing, and they're not doing anything that we're talking about. So if you want to improve things dramatically and increase your chances of getting the right person, having those chances go through the roof, then start to do the things that we're talking about. None of it's rocket science. It's all very doable, but you have to be committed to it, and you have to be disciplined to make sure that you're doing it. And that when the biases start to emerge and arise, either within yourself or on the team, that there's a mechanism to call it out and to address it head on, so that you're not just tiptoeing around each other, but you can actually make sure that we're not going down a path that just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Treat it as a business transaction. Yep. Do it with data, do your analytics, have your conversations beforehand, assess your team that you have now. Who are they and why do they function really well in these roles? And then create your job profiles and your applications around that. You just want to repeat it with a few tweaks into what you need, so you can create that great team synergy and organizational success.
Yeah, excellent. So now let's flip to the other side. Now we set up an applicant for the possibility of having a successful interview because we actually know what we want and we've communicated that. Okay, so now what does the interviewee need to be doing in preparation for that interview to make sure that they're putting their best foot forward?
Well, they need to prepare long before they get the phone call, because the reality is they're probably going to get 2 or 3 days notice that they have an interview. And that's when everybody panics. And my whole piece working with clients and, doing a lot of the resourcing that I'm doing is explaining that interviewing is a skill. You have to learn how to do it. You have to interview to the job that you're applying to. So you need to understand what that job is, and you need to practice for success. The time is not to practice in the middle of the interview and just say, oh, well, I can come up with an answer. No, because this is really you putting into practice all the stuff you put into that resume. And so I tell them, yes, it's a business transaction, but I want you to think, this piece of paper, this resume, this application that you hand in to all these employers, how much did that cost you? How much was that education? How much was all that work experience, all that extra training you had to do? Maybe you had to do some volunteer work or internship that you didn't really get paid for. So literally, if you put a value on your resume, how much is it? And now you don't put any time, practice, or effort into the interview. It doesn't make any sense, because guess what? And you and I both know from an HR perspective, we got 500 of these resumes. We have a whole pile that look almost the same as yours does. They're not that different. You all screened in because you've hit the key indicators we're looking for. How are you going to now bump yourself to the top of that pile that we hire you? Well, that's all going to be based on the interview. Right or wrong, it's our 45-minute glimpse into who you are, and you have got to be able to nail it. You have to give me the detail, you have to give me the proof, you have to give me the examples, and you have to link it to the job that I want to hire you for, so that I believe you are by far my best asset. You're the one I need to invest in. And you're never going to be able to do that if you haven't practiced.
Right. So preparation, obviously, practice makes perfect. Thinking through the types of questions you may be asked, actually literally sitting down with somebody to practice going through answers. And I don't care how experienced you are as being interviewed. If you've been through 1,000 interviews, you still need to practice. And every interview is going to be different. Every organization is different. Just like you can't have one generic resume that you send out to every potential employer, you can't have canned responses to common interview questions that are going to be exactly the same for every person you interview with, right? Because they're going to be looking for different things. And so you have to understand who they are as an organization, what their needs are, what their values are, what their team dynamics are to the best extent possible that you can ascertain that. And then practice with the types of answers that are going to resonate with them. Put your best foot forward. If you truly believe that you have the competencies and capabilities to help them be successful, and that this is a job that not only is going to, you're a good fit for them, but they're going to be a good fit for you in your career, then put the time in to make sure that you can demonstrate that to them, that you can really help them to see it in you. And that's something that I think so many people just don't do. Even if they do all the traditional kind of preparation pieces, they don't think about it in terms of, how am I going to respond specifically to this organization, perhaps even differently than I responded to the interview I had 2 days ago.
Well, and that's a good point, because you don't know, you can't edit your own stuff. It's impossible. So I've definitely learned this in writing a book. I've had it edited 4 times now, because I can't see what other people see. I can't read what other people read. I can't figure out where there needs to be more detail. So as an interview coach, that's literally what I do for people. And sometimes that favorite example that they keep giving over and over in their interviews, and then they can't understand why they always land second or they land third. Well, now when I hear the example, I'm able to edit it. I'm able to say, okay, I think I understand what you're saying, but you're actually talking more about leadership than you are teamwork. And that's a huge one that people mix up. They talk about being the leader of the team. Well, that's not teamwork. They're very different competencies. So people will be giving this, well, I've been giving that example forever. Well, I know, but it was the wrong one. So but nobody told you. We can't debrief you on your answers after and say, that was great, this one wasn't. So you need to find somebody that can help you do that. The other really neat part is that I teach people how to really understand what the job's looking for. And then if you don't have examples, or you can't think of something of how you've done it, go and talk to people that know you. It's going to take time, but guess what? You might get the best example about problem solving that you hadn't even thought of, because it's what somebody else has observed in you. And I do this a lot too. Like, I let them talk on and on and on and giving me their answers. And then we end up using elements of it later on, because I'll say, can you tell me more about that project you were talking about earlier? Tell me how you did that. What skills did you use? How did you come up with that solution, et cetera, et cetera. And they start to generate examples they didn't even know they had.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Academy. Courses, micro-credentials, and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. All HCI Academy courses, micro-credentials, and certificates are designed, developed, and delivered by award-winning and internationally renowned scholars, educators, thought leaders, executives, and practitioners. Our courses, micro-credentials, and certificates will help you make your mark on the future of work and make an immediate impact in your organizations. Check out the HCI Academy and our many course offerings and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. Having those practice sessions are going to be really key, just so you can get comfortable articulating, what you want to say, but also, like you said, to flesh out ideas, to perhaps get a different perspective, people you know and trust, who you feel safe around, who can, give you sometimes blunt feedback and really help you to maybe see the question from a different angle. I know that as I've coached people on interviewing, that's often one of the most useful outcomes for them, right? As they just run things by me, is, just kind of pushing and prodding them a little bit so they can perhaps, approach the question slightly differently than what they had been thinking about previously, which unlocks a whole different set of examples or experiences that now they're ready to share, right?
Yeah, and it helps too if people are trying to go for a job they've never done before. So that could be like a management position. You've always worked at this level in the organization, and now you want to shoot for that promotion, or you're trying to correlate what you do now to a completely different job. That takes some skill, and it takes, we have to work on the imposter syndrome. The idea that I'm trying to speak of something I've never done and convince not only you, but me that I can do it. And so that confidence building, it takes some time, and we have to work on it. It's fun. I love it, and we have lots of fun, but I definitely start with candidates who are not feeling very confident or who've been pretty frustrated by other interview processes. So sometimes we have to work on that. And then the other one is exactly what you were talking about earlier, John, where I can't predict what they're going to ask you. We can try, but they might throw you a question that's way out in left field. And they're doing that because you said you're innovative. You said you're analytical. You said you're a problem solver. So work your way through the question. You weren't expecting it. What are you going to do with it? The more you've practiced, the more you've done this really deep dive into yourself and how you can link yourself to this job, you will be able to answer that question. You'll be able to come up with something because you've really thought about it. But if you've only had 48 hours to memorize a few answers and a couple of examples, no, you're going to go blank, guaranteed. We all do. It's just tunnel vision and you can't even think. So I just don't know why people wouldn't want to set themselves up for success. It's heartbreaking being that panelist and watching people not be successful and know how badly they wanted this job and how much they spent on that resume. So that's really why I started this job, was because I want to see people, reach their potential, but I know the work they're going to have to do to get there.
As we're getting close to wrapping up today, I'm just wondering if there's any other key errors that you just see over and over and over again amongst, people you coach, or even in the interviews that you've conducted in the past, that we can try to avoid.
100%. It's not giving enough detail. It's being way too generic and understanding what the job is. You need to have a very in-depth understanding of what my job is you're applying for, what skills you offer to that job. Make the links for me. Not my job as the panelist to try to make the links. and give me proof, give me examples. And you have to do it in a succinct way too, right, John? Because we don't want to listen to a 25-minute answer where you've given us a whole bunch of stuff and then you think somewhere in there is the answer. Nope. You've got 5 minutes to give me all of that in a nice, wrapped up bow. So that takes practice, but that's definitely, I would say, the biggest place people lose marks. A, you have to understand how we mark, and B, you have to know how to get them.
Yeah. And again, it takes practice. And I have to admit, I'm one that I tend to be a little bit overly verbose. I don't mind going into detail. Detail's great, but you also have to read the room and you have to be able to see like at what point people's eyes are glazing over, at what point, you have a sense of like how long you've been going on. One of the things that I think is really nice as the employer, as the interviewer, is to give, you have these questions planned in advance, and say you have a 30-minute interview scheduled and you have 5 questions. Tell them this is a 30-minute interview. You have 5 questions. That gives them the chance to pace themselves, to gauge how much detail you might want from a particular answer versus how much, overall time they have. And it's even okay to update them and say, okay, we just finished question 3. We're at 20 minutes. We have 10 minutes left for the final 2 questions. That's totally fine. And that will give people the chance to put their best foot forward. Even
better, give them the questions. Give them the questions.
Yeah, why not? Right.
I used to give them the questions 5 minutes for every question. So if it's 6 questions, I give you half an hour. Why? Because my answers are a lot better. Now you're not going to tell me all your skills, education, experience, and everything in the first question because you want to tell me all this stuff. If I gave you the questions, oh, that's the answer to question 3. So now you don't give me a whole bunch of stuff in question 1 I didn't need, which is what happens. And then I have to repeat it in question 3. So it actually made the interviews a lot better. People could organize themselves and organize their thoughts. And it was easier as a panelist. So I say, give them the questions, and definitely put the questions in front of them. And in a Zoom interview, you can do it easily. Just pop them up on the screen. It's very hard if you're testing the person's only their verbal working knowledge. 10% of us are verbal listeners. 10%. Most of us need to see it or do it in addition. So if I actually get to read the words of the question and refer back to it as I'm answering the question, then you're going to get the full answer. Otherwise, I'm supposed to retain everything you asked me and answer it, and then I forget an element. Well, because I didn't have the question. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can set people up, and your interviews will be a lot better, and you will thank me as panelists, I guarantee it. And as candidates, you just need to practice, really know what you're interviewing for, and work with somebody. Invest in yourself. It's absolutely worth it.
Well said, Carrie-Lynn. It has just been a pleasure. I note the time. I'm going to have to let you go here in just a minute. But before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
For sure. So hashtag Carrie-Lynn Hotson, all one word. That will help you find all of my YouTube videos. I've created a whole bunch of free resources for people to learn more about interviewing. And my website is www.jobinterviewcoach.ca. I've got an online course, I have an ebook, I have YouTube videos, and I do one-on-one coaching. And it's a lot of fun. And I learn more and more about every job out there and help people rock their interviews.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Carrie-Lynn can do for you to rock that next interview. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Check out my new book, The Future Leader, Creating and Transforming Next-Gen Organizations. Stemming from 2 decades of professional experience and over 600 in-depth interviews with executives, thought leaders, and scholars from across the globe, The Future Leader will help you explore the ordinary, everyday actions that will help you to prepare to lead in the future of work, to respond to an uncertain future, and to produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership, the journey of becoming a truly remarkable leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There is no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of your problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for your individuals, teams, and organizations. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.